that flight to Singapore. The official line from the football club was that he was nursing that slight or minor thigh injury and he would recover back here at Tyneside. And then the news broke just about an hour or so later that, as you rightly say, Isak wants to explore his options this transfer window. Of course, that on the back of an unofficial approach from Liverpool last week to Newcastle. Instead, though, of course, at that moment, should I say, Newcastle were trying to sign Hugo Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt, and instead of him coming to Newcastle, Ekitike went to Liverpool. I think most Newcastle fans would have hoped that would have been the end of it, but this news today that Isak is looking to explore his options really has them in a fit of panic, because they don't want to lose Alexander Isak and they don't want to lose him to a Premier League rival in the shape of Liverpool, who have already signed Ekitike, who I think was supposed to be Isak's long-term replacement. So Isak still here on Tyneside as Newcastle spend the next 12 days away. They've got friendlies against Arsenal on Sunday, then Tottenham Hotspur, and then against a South Korean All-Stars side before returning back here, just 2 weeks before the season begins. So yeah, as you rightly say, not what any Newcastle United supporter wanted. They wanted to be signing players this window. They thought it was the window they would finally strengthen. They've really struggled to do that, only bringing in Anthony Elanga so far, and now the fear from them that Alexander Isak could be about to go after he told the club he wants to explore his options over a potential departure.
Keith, don't go away. We're going to come back to you in just a moment, but thank you very much for that. So, two sides to this story. Mark McAdam is here with us. Liverpool, they want him. How serious are they about getting him?
Well, the fact that they made an approach last week suggests that they were willing to pay what Newcastle were looking for, as Keith said, £150 million. So therefore, the admiration doesn't suddenly disappear despite the signing of Hugo Ekitike. They're happy with the strike force, they're happy with the squad they've got. But this is a new summer for Arne Slot. This is the first time he's really attacked a transfer window. He's had 12 months with the squad. He understands the Premier League. He's now a Premier League winner, and he wants to make Liverpool even better, and that means signing the very best players they possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely does. Well, they've just got Ekitike in the door. As we've said, that's going to... Their price, the money they've spent, nearly £300 million. To get Isak in, it's going to cost a fortune. How do they do that?
Well, quite simply, Mike, Liverpool can afford to do that because they are very, very sensibly and sustainably run by FSG, and they have been for a number of years. An independent football finance expert has said to me today, Liverpool could spend 400 million. No, actually, they could spend 500 million in this summer's transfer window and still be PSR compliant because they are so well run. Now, first things first. Last summer, the summer of 24, they didn't spend any money. So therefore, they've got a big wedge of cash in their pocket from last summer that was unspent. So therefore, that's helping them in this summer. When you look at their turnover, £614 million in their last set of accounts. It's going to be even more because of the commercial success, because of the football success, because of the bonuses that are attached to a lot of those commercial packages that they've set up. So therefore, the income is going to go up. You have to remember that PSR allows sides to lose 105 million over 3 years. So all of these accountancy periods are done in 3-year cycles. A year falls off the end and a new year comes in, and then that's how they revise their PSR targets. The other thing to point out, player sales. So far this summer, they've generated around 60 million in player sales. And if you add in potential player sales, the likes of Luis Diaz, Darwin Núñez, Harvey Elliott, that could be worth 150 to 200 million in those 3 players alone. So suddenly, their net spend over the course of this summer actually looks quite healthy on top of being a really well-run club. Liverpool only spend where necessary. They target the players they believe can make the first team better. Last summer, they didn't feel anyone was on the market, so they didn't spend. Right now, they're identifying young players between the age of 21 and 23 that they feel can make them even better. They're creating a team not just for this season, but for the next 5 to 10 years to dominate football.
Mark, you've sent a shiver down the spine of every other Premier League team and their supporters, particularly Newcastle. Let's go back to Keith Downey. Right, Keith, speaking of the fans, what on earth have they made of the news that Isak could be going out of the door?
Look, it's strange, Mike, isn't it? Because in the space of a couple of hours, it was, we can't lose Isak at any cost. But then I think when they learn that the player is or wants to explore a potential exit from the club, they think, well, hang on, can we really keep an unhappy player going into the new season? Look, the last thing Newcastle need is Alexander Isak unhappy going into the new season. And I have to suggest that was probably part of the reason why he was not on this trip to Singapore, and part of the reason why he was sent home from Glasgow at the weekend. But yeah, I think the supporters, some of them, the ones I've spoken to anyway, are almost sort of coming around to the idea that, look, if a player doesn't want to be here or his head has been turned to an extent, then let them go, but make sure that we get top dollar for him and make sure we've got enough time to try and get in a replacement. I touched on it earlier, it's been a bad window for Newcastle so far. I mean, Eddie Howe's been operating without a sporting director. Of course, Paul Mitchell left last month, so Howe himself and his nephew Andy Howe from the recruitment department have been doing a lot of the negotiating, and I think it's taken it out of them. I mean, Eddie Howe looked exhausted at Celtic Park on Saturday, and that's before a ball's even been kicked this season. So look, I think if you ask the fans, their ideal situation would be to keep Alexander Isak. If that wasn't to be the case, I'm sure they would have welcomed Hugo Ekitike to the club, but of course he's gone to Liverpool. But I think a lot of them now, listening to the news today, will be now thinking, who do we get next? Maybe we should sell, bank what will be a British transfer record, as Mark touched on there, and go out and spend some money, because they've been operating the last couple of years with their hands tied behind their backs, and by selling someone like Isak for that sort of money would give them flexibility in the market. This is what the Newcastle United fans said to me earlier today.
It's obviously devastating to lose Isak if we do lose him. Best striker in the world, in my opinion, but no player is bigger than the club. You know, for me, we have to move quickly. This should have been sorted already. We need to get his replacement in, and the money will bring in 4 or 5 quality replacements, hopefully.
If he wants to go, he can, go. He's done everything he could for the club, hasn't he? So I think he'd go with everyone's well wishes. I think if he is going to go, the time's now, so we can act and get some players in ASAP. I think going into a Champions League season without him and no replacements would be, devastating.
It's quite hard because I feel like we should be spending more money and a bit faster, because we keep losing all our targets, and to lose Isak as well would be really not great.
He wants to leave, so let him leave. I don't want a sulking striker here for the next 12 months, run his contract down, maybe get an injury, maybe get less money for him. Just replace him now for me. If he wants to go, let him go.
Keith, I'm going to steal the words of that young man, the penultimate person you spoke to there, who said, I feel like we should be spending more money. Shouldn't Newcastle have done more in this window, given they've won their first domestic trophy in 70 years and they're in the Champions League?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think the cup triumph will have much to do with it financially for them. But what they have done is they haven't spent the last few transfer windows. They've held the money back, Mike, and the plan was to have a real go this window. They wanted to sign a goalkeeper, a central defender, a right winger and a central attacker. Now, they've managed to bring in one of those in the shape of Anthony Elanga, 52 plus £3 million in add-ons, but it's been frustrating across the board. There's been a protracted attempt from Burnley. They've not managed to get that over the line. They failed to bring in a central defender. We know they tried and failed multiple times last summer to sign Mark Guehi from Crystal Palace, so they're still looking in that position. It took a long time to get Anthony Elanga over the line. They'd already tried for Brian Mbeumo, and then in the centre forward options, they've missed out on Liam Delap, they've missed out on João Pedro, they've missed out now on Hugo Ekitike, but at least they still have Alexander Isak. However, there's all this now hanging over his head and the speculation that he might go. So look, it's been a very frustrating window, not helped by the fact they don't have a sporting director. They've not managed to replace a chief executive either. So as I touched on earlier, Eddie Howe is having to do a lot of the spade work himself, and he's found it very, very difficult. So look, they've got a lot of work to do in the transfer window. If Isak goes, I suggest they've got a ridiculous amount of work to do, because they then need to bring in 2 strikers. They already need one at the moment. Now, they are fairly, I wouldn't say close, but they're quite far down the line with a move for the Brentford striker, Yohan Wissa. We told you 48 hours ago that they'd had a £25 million bid turned down for the Congolese striker. They remain at the table with Brentford, and there's a hope that a deal can be done. But he is not seen as a replacement for Alexander Isak. The idea was for him to come in and be a supplementary striker for Alexander Isak. So if Isak was to go, they would still need another one. Now, look, I know this news sounds cataclysmic, and the Newcastle fans, I've heard mentions of it's like the Andy Cole situation all over again. And I know it sounds like a really, really bad situation, but I don't think we've heard the end of it. As Mark touched on earlier, it's still difficult for Liverpool to do a deal because of the money they've spent already. I would suggest they probably still have to sell to be able to come in for someone like Alexander Isak. And Eddie Howe is an unbelievable man-manager, and he will rely on those powers this summer if Isak is to remain. Perhaps they will come together with a new contract offer for the striker to keep him happy, but I feel the club are going to have to do something to placate him, because he's clearly frustrated that he was blocked from talking to potential suitors over the last week. And as a couple of the fans said there, the last thing you want to do is head into the new season, a big season in both Premier League and Champions League. The last thing you want to do is head into that with an unhappy striker, an unhappy talisman on their hands. So we've got a long way to go until the end of the window. Something tells me, Mike, this is not the last we've heard of this. Whether it means Isak is leaving or staying, this one, due to the numbers that are involved in this potential departure from Newcastle, is going to rumble on throughout the transfer window.
Yeah, it absolutely will. Keith Downey, live from St James's Park for the moment. Thank you. Well, let's go back to the Liverpool side of things. Now, they're currently on a pre-season tour in Hong Kong, and their skipper, Virgil van Dijk, has revealed they're continuing to work hard to improve the squad.
Listen, I think this season we all start from scratch. I think everyone has tried to improve their teams, and we as well. I think we did a great addition to the team so far. And let's see what happens for the rest of the transfer window. But I think it's all down to hard work, showing our quality, consistency, and we know how difficult that is. So focus on ourselves, and the hard work obviously is already going. You know, we work so hard in training.
Indumentaria, la Kings Limited Gold Edition. Solo hay 50 unidades de todos los equipos y también puede ser vuestra entrando en kingsleague.pro. Así que es los datos a tener en cuenta en cuanto a indumentarias. Gran partido, Gonzalo, Gerard, el que tenemos por delante.
Ojo, ojo, estilo La Bombonera, estadio de River.
Hostia, más minutos de retraso en el inicio, ¿eh? Ya tenemos lío.
Lo llamó Edo, dibujando la parábola sobre la banda derecha, donde en el vértice del área aparece Nadir. ¡Nadir para adentro! ¡Gol! De Nadir Lua, que tiene una facilidad pasmosa. Encuentra a Pablo, qué balón para Nadir para el segundo. Se tafa de Cócera, es un golazo. ¡Es un golazo! Señoras, señores, bienvenidos al show de Nadir Lua. Pibe.
El mejor.
Vamos
haciendo espionaje, ¿eh?
Vaya mierda dado, pibe. Va, ya te puedes ir a la cúpula a comer, va.
Tiene que salir Cócera para entregar hacia el centro. Se la regala Coy, le puede pegar Coy para adentro.
Vaya chicha, nano.
¡Gol! De Porcinos Óscar Coy. Ah, pues sí.
Pero es que, señores,
Que no te lo dije, hombre.
Tenemos, ¿cómo lo usamos? Penalti.
Penalti.
¿Será penalti?
Vamos, Cuni.
Puede meter en el partido a Cuni. Jordi para adentro, ¡qué golazo!
¡Guau!
¡Dios!
¡Gol! Vamos con Nadir Lua y con Laura Vizcaíno.
Pues sí, Nadir, 2 goles, victoria y a cuartos, enhorabuena.
Sí, sabíamos que el partido iba a ser muy importante porque veníamos de una muy mala dinámica. El equipo ha estado bien, sufríamos defensivamente y creo que hemos estado muy juntitos. Y nada, primer objetivo cumplido.
Os espera Science, rival complicado, imagino.
Sí, empatamos contra ellos y shootout perdimos. Ha quedado segundo por algo. Nada, concentración, confianza con nosotros mismos y intentar ganar para el sábado estar en el Wizzing.
Pues lo veremos mañana, mucha suerte.